What happens when a group of racist men targets the wrong black woman, thinking she's an easy victim, only to find out that she is a former Navy SEAL? Watch as she fights back against the group and uncovers a shocking secret that leads to wide-scale justice against racism in the community. This story isn't just about self-defense. It's about courage, resilience, and the power of standing up to injustice. Camille's journey goes beyond her confrontation in a quiet park. It delves into dismantling a system of fear and intimidation that targeted vulnerable communities. Based on true events, this tale of bravery shows how one woman's resolve led to the unraveling of a hate-driven network, proving that justice can prevail when we refuse to back down. Join us as we explore Camille's inspiring fight for what's right. And don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share for many others to see and spread good values to the community. The park was bathed in the warm, golden light of a late afternoon, its worn paths weaving between towering trees and open green spaces. Children's laughter echoed from the playground as they swung and chased each other, their carefree voices mixing with the faint chirping of birds. Couples strolled along the path, holding hands, while joggers passed by, nodding politely at the occasional passerby. It was a peaceful scene, the kind that invites a rare sense of calm. On a lone bench near the edge of a small pond, Camille Johnson sat quietly. Her black leather jacket lay beside her, revealing a muscular frame beneath a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. A faint scar ran along her forearm, just visible in the soft sunlight, a subtle reminder of a life forged in battles far from the serenity of this park. Camille's expression was relaxed, but her eyes moved constantly, scanning her surroundings with a practiced, almost subconscious precision. A jogger offered her a polite smile as they passed, and she returned the gesture, though her focus remained sharp. Years as a Navy SEAL had sharpened her instincts, and even now, far removed from active duty, she couldn't help but notice the details others might overlook. The awkward shuffle of a man standing a few yards away, the group of teenagers lingering a little too long near the playground. Something about the air felt off, a subtle prickle running down her spine. Across the park, a group of 4 men loitered beneath a massive oak tree. Their laughter was loud and harsh, cutting through the peaceful ambiance. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a tattoo snaking up his neck, leaned casually against the tree, his eyes scanning the park like a predator surveying his territory. He nudged the wiry man next to him, gesturing in Camille's direction. "That one," he muttered, a sneer twisting his lips, "sitting there all smug like she owns the place. Easy pickings." Camille felt their eyes on her before she saw them. She remained seated, her posture relaxed, but her mind began working like a machine, calculating possibilities. She had faced danger before, far worse than this. Yet, as the men began moving toward her, their voices carrying over the playground, she knew trouble was coming. Her hand rested casually on her lap, her other arm draped over the back of the bench. She shifted slightly, just enough to appear vulnerable, drawing them in. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips as her instincts kicked in. "All right," she murmured to herself, her voice calm and steady. "Let's see what you've got." The 4 men strolled across the park with a swagger that demanded attention. Their mocking laughter and loud banter echoed through the open space, drawing the occasional glance from bystanders who quickly looked away, unwilling to get involved. At their center was the leader, a tall man with broad shoulders, a shaved head, and a tattoo snaking up his neck. He walked with slow, deliberate strides, his eyes locked on Camille. "Afternoon, ma'am," he called out, his voice dripping with mock politeness as he reached her bench. "Mighty nice day to be out here alone, don't you think?" Camille glanced up slowly, meeting his gaze with a calm, unflinching stare. "It is," she replied evenly. "What do you want?" The camera. His smirk widened, revealing yellowed teeth as he gestured toward her bag resting beside her. "That's a nice bag. Bet it's got something good in it. Why don't you hand it over? Be polite now. We wouldn't want things to get messy." Behind him, his crew chuckled, emboldened by his bravado. A wiry man with a patchy beard leaned closer, grinning. "Or maybe she thinks she's too good for us. You one of those types, lady?" Camille's expression didn't change, but her voice turned cold. "I'm just sitting here minding my business. You should do the same." The leader's smirk faltered, replaced by a sneer. "Oh, you've got a mouth on you, huh? Let me guess you think you're better than us, sitting here like you own the place. Maybe we ought to teach you a lesson about respect." Camille felt the tension rising. The men moved closer, forming a loose semicircle around her bench. Her mind worked quickly, analyzing their positions and calculating her options. She remained still, her posture relaxed, but poised for action. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," she said, her tone steady. "But I do think you should walk away while you still can." Her calm demeanor only fueled their aggression. The wiry man cracked his knuckles, grinning as he took a step forward. "And what if we don't, huh? What are you going to do about it?" Camille stood up slowly, the movement deliberate. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder, her eyes never leaving the leader's. She was shorter than him, but the quiet authority in her stance unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "You really think this is going to go the way you planned?" she asked quietly, her words a challenge. "Walk away, now." The leader's face twisted in anger. "You think you're tough? We'll see how long that lasts." One of the younger men lunged first, his movements clumsy and driven by overconfidence. Camille sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing his arm and using his momentum to send him sprawling to the ground. He groaned in pain, clutching his shoulder as the others froze in stunned silence. "What the hell are you waiting for?" the leader barked, motioning for the others to attack. The wiry man came next, swinging wildly at her. Camille blocked his strike with precision, delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs and a quick kick to his knee, sending him stumbling backward. His balance faltered, and he hit the ground with a thud, cursing loudly. The second younger man grabbed a tree branch, swinging it like a bat. Camille stepped inside his reach, twisting the branch out of his hands before driving her palm into his chest. The impact forced him back, gasping for air. "Stay down," she warned, her voice cold and firm. The leader roared in frustration, charging at her with everything he had. Camille waited until the last moment, sidestepping and using his momentum to drive him into a nearby tree. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he staggered, clutching the bark for support. Still, he wasn't done. He swung again, his punches wide and uncoordinated. Camille ducked easily, delivering a swift strike to his torso, followed by a low kick to his shin. He stumbled but stayed upright, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. "Come on, all of you," he shouted, motioning for the others to join him. Camille's muscles tensed as the remaining men closed in. Despite their injuries, their anger drove them forward. She moved like a whirlwind, deflecting their attacks with precise, economical movements. A sharp kick here, a well-placed strike there. Each move calculated to neutralize her opponents without wasting energy. The fight was chaotic and relentless, but Camille's training gave her the upper hand. Her ribs ached from a poorly blocked punch, and her forearm throbbed where the branch had grazed her, but she pushed the pain aside, her focus unbroken. Finally, the leader stumbled back, his face twisted in fury. "You think this is over?" he spat, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. Camille straightened, her breathing steady despite the effort she'd exerted. "Yes," she said, her tone ice-cold. "It is." At that moment, the distant wail of sirens cut through the air. The men exchanged panicked glances, their bravado crumbling, as flashing red and blue lights appeared through the trees. "Cops are coming," one of the younger men muttered, taking a cautious step back. "Let's go," the wiry man hissed, already retreating. The leader glared at Camille one last time, his fists trembling at his sides. "This ain't over," he snarled, before turning and motioning for his crew to follow. Camille stood her ground, watching as they disappeared into the shadows. Only when she was sure they were gone did she allow herself to exhale, her body relaxing slightly. The sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of law enforcement. Camille adjusted the strap of her bag and waited, ready to explain everything to the officers who would soon arrive. She knew this was only the beginning. The wail of sirens pierced the park's quiet, growing louder as two police cars pulled up along the gravel path. Red and blue lights reflected off the trees, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. Camille stood near the bench, her posture steady despite the dull ache in her ribs and forearm. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos of the moments before. As the officers stepped out, scanning the area cautiously, one approached her with a firm but professional tone. "Ma'am, are you all right? We got a call about a disturbance." Camille nodded, her voice even. "I'm fine. They're gone now. 4 men, mid-20s. The leader is tall, shaved head, tattoo on his neck. They targeted me because they thought I was alone." The officer's eyes flicked to the scrape on her arm and the faint bruises starting to show on her skin. "Did they hurt you?" "Nothing I couldn't handle," she replied, her tone steady but resolute. Another officer scanned the area, taking in the disturbed dirt, a discarded branch, and one of the men's hats left behind. "Looks like they left in a hurry," he muttered to his partner. Camille pointed toward the path they had taken. "They went that way. You'll find them if you're quick." The first officer pulled out a notepad, jotting down her words. "Did they say anything specific? Anything that could suggest why they targeted you?" Camille's jaw tightened, her voice turning cold. "It wasn't random. They picked me because I'm black. They wanted to intimidate me. It's not the first time they've done this, and it won't be the last if they're not stopped." The officer's expression hardened as he finished his notes. "We'll need you to come down to the station to file a formal report." Camille nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I'll meet you there." As the officers began to search the area and relay descriptions of the suspects over their radios, Camille stood quietly for a moment, taking in the stillness of the park. The laughter of children on the swings had returned, a reminder of the life she was determined to protect from people like those men. She tightened her grip on her bag, her mind already racing ahead. This wasn't just about what happened to her. It was about uncovering the larger web of hate that enabled these men to act with such confidence. "They thought they could scare me," she murmured to herself, her voice steady. "They were wrong." With one last glance at the bench where it had all started, Camille turned toward the waiting patrol car, ready to take the first step in bringing them and whoever was behind them to justice. The day after the attack, Camille sat in her living room, a laptop perched on the coffee table. She scrolled through local news reports and community forums, her sharp gaze dissecting every detail. Patterns began to emerge, a string of incidents targeting minorities, vandalism, harassment, and physical assaults. The victims often described similar attackers, operating with a brazen confidence that suggested they believed they were untouchable. Camille's military training had taught her the importance of recognizing patterns, and this was no coincidence. The incidents spanned several neighborhoods, targeting specific communities. Each act was designed not just to harm, but to send a message of fear and exclusion. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was Sarah Carter, a tenacious journalist and one of Camille's closest friends. "I heard about what happened," Sarah said, her voice tinged with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Camille replied, "but this isn't just about me. These guys didn't pick me at random. There's a larger pattern here, and I need your help to uncover it." Sarah hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. "Send me what you have. If there's something bigger at play, we'll find it." Over the next few days, Camille and Sarah worked tirelessly. Camille traced reports of similar incidents, while Sarah used her investigative skills to dig deeper into funding and organizational ties. What they uncovered was chilling. These attacks weren't isolated events. They were part of a coordinated effort to intimidate and displace minority communities, driving them out of certain areas. The deeper they dug, the more connections they found, and one name began to stand out: Paul Hendrick. On the surface, Hendrick was a respected businessman, owning several construction companies and donating generously to community initiatives. But beneath the polished veneer was a network of shell companies and questionable associations. "He's laundering money," Sarah explained one evening, her voice tinged with frustration as she scrolled through financial records. "Look at this. Funds from his construction companies are funneled into these vague community improvement accounts. From there, it's distributed to groups that align with his agenda. It's too well organized to be a coincidence." Camille frowned, leaning over to examine the documents. "What kind of agenda?" Sarah pulled up a series of public speeches Hendrick had given, all filled with coded language. He talks about restoring community values and protecting our neighborhoods. To the average listener, it sounds harmless, but to the groups he's funding, it's a call to action. He's using dog whistles to incite hate without ever explicitly saying it. Further investigation revealed that Hendricks' operations were decentralized, making them harder to trace. Each hate group acted independently but operated under the same guiding principles and received funding through Hendricks' network. This structure insulated him, ensuring that if one group was exposed, it wouldn't directly implicate him. "What we're dealing with isn't just a group of thugs," Camille said, her tone grim. "It's an organized network. Hendricks not just funding these attacks, he's orchestrating them, and the way he's set it up, he thinks he's untouchable." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "He's smart, I'll give him that, but no one's untouchable. We just need to find the cracks in his system." Camille knew they needed more than circumstantial evidence. They needed concrete proof that tied Hendrick directly to the hate groups. It wouldn't be easy. His shell companies were meticulously maintained, and his ties to the attacks were carefully concealed. "I'll reach out to some sources," Sarah said. "See if I can find anyone willing to talk about Hendrick's operations. Someone on the inside might be the key to taking him down." Camille's determination only grew. "And I'll work with the police. If we can connect him to the gang that attacked me, we can start pulling at the threads of his network. He made one mistake thinking I'd let this go." The two women exchanged a look, their shared resolve unspoken but palpable. They were up against a man with significant resources and a carefully crafted facade, but Camille had faced bigger challenges before, and she wasn't about to back down. Paul Hendrick had built an empire of fear and intimidation, preying on the vulnerable and relying on the complacency of others to protect him. Camille was determined to be the exception. She wouldn't stop until his entire operation was dismantled, piece by piece. As she gathered her notes and prepared for her next move, Camille knew the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she had a name, a target, and that was all she needed to begin. Camille's training and instincts made her an invaluable asset to the police. Over the weeks following her attack, she worked closely with Officer Reyes, sharing every piece of intel she and Sarah had uncovered. Together they mapped out Hendrick's network, connecting the dots between his shell companies, financial transactions, and the hate groups operating under his influence. Her testimony was critical in building the case. She provided a detailed account of the gang's behavior, the attack, and their racist motivations. Her insights into Hendrick's decentralized network helped the police understand how he stayed insulated while directing operations. Camille's input was instrumental in identifying potential weak points to exploit. When the police received word that Hendrick's gang, including Tank, had been seen frequenting an old warehouse on Fletcher Street, Camille helped plan the raid. Using her military expertise, she advised the officers on entry points, potential threats, and how to minimize collateral damage. "This is our best shot," she told Reyes during the briefing. "We go in strong, but we stay controlled. No one gets away, and no one gets hurt unless it's absolutely necessary." As night fell, two unmarked police vans rolled up to the warehouse. Officers moved silently, positioning themselves around the building. Camille, watching from a distance, scanned the area with practiced precision. She spotted two men near the entrance, one smoking a cigarette, their postures tense but unaware of the approaching danger. The signal was given and the team moved in. Officers stormed the warehouse with precision, their commands echoing in the cavernous space. Inside, the gang was caught off guard, scrambling to react. Camille entered behind the officers, her focus sharp as her eyes darted across the room. Tank, standing near a makeshift table surrounded by his crew, froze when he saw her. His expression twisted into a mix of anger and disbelief. "You," he snarled, stepping forward. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Camille didn't flinch, her voice calm and cutting. "Your game is over, Tank. You're done." As the police moved in to restrain his men, Tank lunged toward Camille in a last act of defiance. She sidestepped easily, using his momentum to drive him into the wall. He struggled, but her grip was firm, her resolve unshaken. "Let it go," she said coldly, her face inches from his. "This isn't a fight you can win." Tank glared at her but eventually relented as officers placed him in handcuffs. Camille stepped back, watching as the gang was led away. Reyes approached her, a mix of admiration and relief in his expression. "That was clean. We've got him." Camille nodded, her gaze lingering on Tank as he was pushed into the waiting van. "It's a start," she said, her voice steady. "Now we go after Hendrik." The courtroom was tense as the trial of Paul Hendrik began. His defense team, polished and confident, argued that their client was a respected businessman whose charitable contributions had been misinterpreted. They painted him as a victim of overzealous investigators and unreliable witnesses. The prosecution, however, presented a damning case. Tank's testimony was pivotal, though, visibly nervous, he detailed the payments, orders, and unspoken expectations that tied Hendrik to the hate-fueled attacks. The financial records Sarah and Camille had uncovered were equally incriminating. They showed a clear trail of funds flowing from Hendrik's construction companies to shell accounts that financed the hate groups. Tank's cooperation was critical. While the defense tried to discredit him, pointing out his criminal record and plea deal, the evidence corroborated his story. Emails, burner phone logs, and transaction records linked Hendrik directly to the violent activities of his crews. The prosecutor's closing argument was powerful. Hate doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides behind wealth and power, thinking it's untouchable. But today, justice demands accountability. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. On the charges of conspiracy to commit hate crimes and funding organized violence, we find the defendant, Paul Hendrik, guilty. The courtroom buzzed with relief and tension as Hendrik's calm facade cracked. The judge sentenced him to the maximum penalty, ensuring he would spend decades behind bars. Outside the courthouse, Camille stood with Sarah and Officer Reyes, the weight of the victory settling in. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice tinged with exhaustion but satisfaction. Camille nodded, her gaze steady. This was one battle, but it's not the end. There are others like him, but today, justice won. The courtroom was tense as the trial of Paul Hendrik began. His defense team, polished and confident, argued that their client was a respected businessman whose charitable contributions had been misinterpreted. They painted him as a victim of overzealous investigators and unreliable witnesses. The prosecution, however, presented a damning case. Tank's testimony was pivotal. Though visibly nervous, he detailed the payments, orders, and unspoken expectations that tied Hendrik to the hate-fueled attacks. The financial records Sarah and Camille had uncovered were equally incriminating. They showed a clear trail of funds flowing from Hendrik's construction companies to shell accounts that financed the hate groups. Tank's cooperation was critical. While the defense tried to discredit him, pointing out his criminal record and plea deal, the evidence corroborated his story. Emails, burner phone logs, and transaction records linked Hendrik directly to the violent activities of his crews. The prosecutor's closing argument was powerful. Hate doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides behind wealth and power, thinking it's untouchable. But today, justice demands accountability. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. On the charges of conspiracy to commit hate crimes and funding organized violence, we find the defendant, Paul Hendrik, guilty. The courtroom buzzed with relief and tension as Hendrik's calm facade cracked. The judge sentenced him to the maximum penalty, ensuring he would spend decades behind bars. Outside the courthouse, Camille stood with Sarah and Officer Reyes, the weight of the victory settling in. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice tinged with exhaustion but satisfaction. Camille nodded, her gaze steady. "This was one battle, but it's not the end. There are others like him. But today, justice won."